All right, are you guys ready to learn how to edit? I'm just kidding. This would take way too long. I'm not gonna teach you how to edit today. What I am gonna teach you are some basic editing concepts. We're gonna go through some tips. I'm gonna show you what you would do if you decide to edit your own podcast. But there are whole tutorials online and a lot of great resources out there that actually teach you how to edit if that's something that you want to do or you feel like you have to do. But I will tell you, one of the most difficult decisions I had to make in podcasting was whether or not to outsource my editing. And this was at a point where I had probably edited over 600 or so episodes on my own. So I know how to edit. I've been doing it for a long time. I have a background in doing that kind of stuff with radio and television. And so it wasn't that I didn't know how to edit. It was that I had to determine if other things should take priority. Are there other ways that my podcast can be better served if I passed off this responsibility to somebody else? And that is a difficult decision to make. It really is, because this is your baby. This is your podcast. And there's a part of us that thinks no one can do this better than me because no one knows my content. No one knows my content better than me. What if the editor were to just, hack something out that was really important, and all these emotions and thoughts run through our brain. But I'm here to say that my decision to outsource my editing was one of the best decisions I ended up making for my shows, because editing can take a long time and it prohibits you from doing other things in your podcast that truly only you can do. Only you may be able to figure out the topics that you're going to explore. Only you can write your scripts, whatever your responsibilities are. How important is that compared to editing? Now, I know some of this is based on just necessity because bringing in an editor does take some money, right? You have to have some sort of budget set up for that. But the time that you would be making back and just frustration, because truly, if you've never edited before, there's a learning curve. It's not that you can't figure it out. Maybe you've got some downtime now, and this is the perfect time to try editing. I'm all for building your skill set. But if you don't fall in that boat, I would rather you take a closer look at who you could hire in order to take editing off your plate. So the purpose of today's video is to show you the basic concepts and ideas behind editing so you can make an educated choice on whether or not you want to go down this path or you want to outsource it. And if you do want to outsource it, you can always reach out to me because I've got a team of editors that we work with over at the Independent Podcast Network, and I'd be happy to hook you up with an amazing editor that's been proofed, right, that I've used personally and I can vouch for. And for this quick demo, I am using Adobe Audition. It's one of 3 programs that I recommend you use if you're going to edit. And it's the one that's probably on the higher end purchase-wise, but I'll create a document that breaks down which programs I suggest that you use, one of which is free, by the way. But let's take a look at this, because whatever editing program you choose, there are some basics that are going to be the same in each program. What you're looking at here is called the timeline. And you see different rows here. These are all different tracks. And I've gone through and I've labeled each track because, why? Because it's important to stay organized with everything. So I go through and I tell the system what I want these tracks to be. So I've got my intro music here. This is my intro for the show. This is part of an interview that I did. This is my track. This is the guest track. These are sound effects that we used within the show, and here's some background music. This is one way that you can set up your timeline so that everything is really neat and organized. And once all your files are recorded, the first step is to bring all these tracks into your timeline. Because the tracks did look like this when I first brought them in, right? It was one long clip, and then I placed it on the appropriate track line. And then I started listening, right? And usually what I'll do is I will edit the interview first, and then I'll bring in and add sound effects and music later. So you do kind of do these in stages, but this is the end result. Okay, so I'm not gonna play this right from the beginning. I'm actually gonna put my cursor and I'm gonna bring it over here, because what I want you to see is how this jumps from the intro music to the intro to my interview. It includes some sound effects. I want you to see how this is kind of, they're all on separate tracks and how important that is for editing. So take a listen. Hey guys, and welcome to the very first episode of Zencasting, brought to you, of course, by Zencastr. If you record your podcast with remote guests, we would love for you to Google us. Mark inadvertently created a successful media company, and it all started when an employee suggested they start a podcast.
About 5 years ago, my marketing guy came to me and said, "Hey, we need to start a podcast to market what we're doing with Modal Point." And I looked at him and said, "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard." I didn't think podcasts were going anywhere. Back then, there was a technology challenge, right? You had to understand how to download an MP3 file, all that sort of stuff. And I just thought it was a complete waste of my marketing guy's time and my time. And have you ever had somebody that just kept on and kept on and kept on, and eventually you tell them yes just in hopes they go away?
Yes.
That's what happened. So he kept on about the podcast, and I kept telling him no, and eventually I just said yes, and I hoped they would go away. And so we launched the first podcast, Oil and Gas This Week, which is the first oil and gas podcast and the largest today oil and gas podcast in the world.
You're listening to the Oil and Gas This Week podcast with Mark LaCour and Jake Corley. This is the show for...
Okay, so you guys get the point, right? You're basically creating a timeline, and a timeline has multiple tracks, and you're grabbing raw tracks that you recorded or music files, things in their entirety. You're dragging them onto the track, and then it's a game of chop them up. You take a file and you basically edit out the parts that you don't want. Now you have a choice to make. Are you going to try to edit your podcast yourself? Or are you going to hire someone else to do it? And really, it really boils down to three different things you have to ask yourself. Do you have a budget to be able to outsource? Because most editors are probably gonna be around $50 an episode for a 30-minute episode. So kind of keep that in mind. Do you have the budget for it? Do you have the interest in editing? Maybe you don't know how to edit, but this looks really cool to you and you got some free time, and why not? You can save yourself some money. So do you have an interest in it? And the third thing I would ask myself is my time better served doing something else? Because you may be really good at it, or you may really have an interest in it, but your podcast could suffer because you're spending more time on this and less time on other things such as content that really may be something that only you can handle. So you've got some decisions to make. If you need some help in this department, if you're looking for an editor, please let me know. We've got a great team of editors we work with at the Independent Podcast Network, and I'd love to help you out.